Hi guys, I'm Erica. If we haven't met before, hi, hello. I am a personal chef, otherwise known as a professional meal prepper. I went to culinary school, and one of the most frequent things I'm asked is about my experience with culinary school. Is it worth it? What was it like? So today, we're gonna have a little bit of a kitchen big sister moment, cooking fairy godmother moment. I don't know. I'm gonna spill the tea. Sorry, about my experience with culinary school. Before we get into all of that though, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me help you. I'm gonna say it now so I don't have to say it at the end. So I got comfy. Let's first talk about the basics before we get into the nitty-gritty of my experience, and then we'll close things out with my professional opinion on whether or not I think culinary school is worth it. I had you submit some questions over on Instagram. Don't forget to follow me over on Instagram. So we'll be answering those throughout today's video. If you do have other questions that I don't cover or follow-up questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section. I'm always extremely happy to hop in down there. So I went to a smaller culinary school here in New York City called the Natural Gourmet Institute. It's focused on health supportive cooking. We did learn a lot of the classic French culinary technique that you think of when you think of culinary school, but we also learned about things like eating within the seasons, how to cook for people with different dietary requirements. The school I went to has actually since merged with another larger school called the Institute for Culinary Education, and the program is called the Natural Gourmet Center. I went for about a year, including my culinary externship, which was a time that I worked unpaid at a restaurant. The actual time that it took me to complete the program was about 9 months long, and I went part-time. The full-time program also takes around 8 months. Basically, we crammed a lot in on the weekends and at night. My school is accredited. If there isn't some sort of information about that on the culinary school's website, I'd be nervous about it. I did not obtain an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree while I was there, which is why it's a little bit shorter. Most schools that you think of, so like Institute for Culinary Education, the Cordon Bleu, French Culinary Institute, you're not getting a bachelor's or an associate's. Some schools like CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, is more of an actual like college experience. You live on campus for 2 years and you leave with, I believe, an associate's degree in culinary arts. That's the difference. I graduated technically as a certified health supportive chef. So I get asked a lot about experience level and experience requirement going into culinary school, and I will say that I think it's very natural to be nervous about your kitchen experience going into school. I will say that I was definitely proficient in the kitchen, but I wouldn't call myself a whiz before I got to culinary school. I hadn't spent any time in a professional kitchen whatsoever. According to most schools' websites, the only thing you technically need to go to culinary school is a high school diploma or something equivalent like a GED or whatever is the equivalent from wherever you're from. And a lot of schools do require you to show proof that you're in the US legally. I will say also that for my class of 8 people, the experience level really ran the gamut. There were some people like me who had never been in a professional kitchen, but then there were also folks who had worked in restaurants for years. Experience level definitely didn't predict how well people did in culinary school. Okay, I had to be more amongst my pillows and such because we are going to get into it now. We've covered the basics, where I went, how long it took. I should also say I went between the years of 2018 and 2019, so it's been a few years since I've been out of culinary school, but we're gonna talk about my nitty-gritty experience there, and I just wanna be cozy for that. Let's chat about what day-to-day looked like for me. Like I said, I went part-time, which meant that I was there Tuesday nights for like 6 hours at a time, and then on weekends for like 12-hour days. They were long days for sure. So when we actually got into the school building in for class, we would all go to the locker room, change into our chef's whites, which are very ugly. I will just say that. That's fine. It's nice to be in a uniform. Definitely getting into the chef's whites helped me me feel like I was there to cook and learn how to cook. We would go meet our chef instructor in a kitchen/lecture hall, sit down, and we would start the day with a lecture on whatever the topic of the day was. So let's say that we were talking about different techniques for cooking grains. We would sit down and the chef instructor would give us a lecture on cooking grains for a few hours usually. I don't know if people think about that when they think of culinary school, but it definitely is classroom work oriented. I'm sure you can tell I am a type A gal, so that really works for me. I'm a classroom learner through and through. I am not self-directed, which is a big reason that I chose to go to culinary school. But if a classroom environment is not for you, just know that going into it, that there will be classroom work. There were quizzes, there were tests, written ones I'm talking about. Then we would roll right into the chef instructor doing a demo for us on grains. So in the example that we're using, he or she or they would show us the technique of steaming rice. Then they would show us the technique of like a loose boil on rice, what it looks like to make a grain salad. They would spend a couple hours doing that. They were always very impressive. They would have their mise en place laid out. So the amount of work that the chef instructors did to get prepared for our classes was a lot. It's definitely part of what you're paying for, just the chef instructor's expertise and the amount of time that they're putting into the class. Once the demo was over, we'd usually like break for lunch, and then we would roll into us being in charge of executing the technique. So with the example of grains, we usually broke out into groups. Sometimes we did this individually, but the chef instructor would assign us a complicated or relatively straightforward technique. It really just depended on the recipe. And then you and your buddy, or you and your group, or just you alone were in charge of executing the recipe as it was written. After we had all done our techniques, we would sit down and taste everything. If I can find some photos, I'll pop them here of what our tastings would look like, but we'd all sit down, taste, and critique everything. We would be in charge of critiquing each other. The chef instructor would of course weigh in. This was obviously my favorite part of class because it meant a lot of eating. It was quite instructive. We learned a lot from each other's critiques. It was very fun. Gotta wet my whistle. We're really getting into it. Someone asked me what the most valuable thing or the best skill or most useful thing I learned at culinary school. And for me, hands down, it was the time we spent learning knife skills. This was an area that I lacked confidence in before I attended culinary school. I just felt like I was doing things wrong, and to be honest, I was. We spent a lot of time learning the actual knife cuts. We learned what things are called in most professional kitchens. We also learned the vocabulary for the knife, how to hold the knife, stabilize a cutting board. You know I am obsessed with stabilizing my cutting board. I don't want you to get me wrong. My knife skills are still pretty far from perfect, but they're definitely serviceable, and I'm confident about them now. We have a kind of spicy question. Things are heating up. I loved this. I thought it was so funny. Someone asked, on a scale of Gordon Ramsay to Ina Garten, what level of intensity was there? My experience definitely lands more on a gentle Ina side of things. Immediately prior to deciding to go to culinary school, I was diagnosed with a few autoimmune diseases. I was working a very corporate job at the time, but I was teaching myself to cook as well. I wanted a more holistic school, which is why I chose NGI. And I'm not just talking about the foods that we cooked, I'm also talking about the environment. Natural Gourmet Institute, and now Natural Gourmet Center, is focused on health supportive work, and that extends beyond the food that we eat, so that also means like a lower stress environment. It was definitely very hard work, but it wasn't getting yelled at by your chef instructor. Oh, I should also say, if you want to hear me talk more about why I left my corporate job and decided to go to culinary school, drop a comment below. I can probably do another whole separate video on that. So yes, let me know if that's interesting to you. Let's close the experience portion of this out with a little talk about math and science and cooking, because someone asked me if the math science portion of culinary school was difficult for me. I have been referencing this. I've always liked school. I'm not saying that math and science were my best subjects. They definitely were not. The math and science that you need in culinary school is pretty basic. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. If you can do that, you're gonna be fine. I wanted to use this as an excuse to whip out something for memory lane. This is the binder where I kept everything. Let's see. Here's our final exam. We had a written as well as practical final exam. This is kind of math. Traditional vinaigrette is blank parts oil to blank parts vinegar. The answer is 3, 2, 1, if you are curious. It's really not math though, you can see. Let's see, I'm not even seeing any math on this. So yeah, no math really on our final exam. Oh. There's a math exam. What did I get? Oh, I got 100. I got a 95 only on the final though. Yeah, so our math exam, it was actually a take-home math quiz, LOL. Like I said, this is not too hard. Number of tablespoons in a cup, 16 ounces and 3/4 of a cup. How much does 5 cups of brown rice cost? Given the following information, you get it. It's pretty straightforward. You can definitely do it. My beloved binder, a lot of it is just paperwork from our big final project in here, and then like orientation information, but I also obviously saved all my tests and stuff. Okay, we need to get into the real thing that you're here for, my experience with whether or not culinary school is worth it. So I'm sure you can sense that I had an extremely positive experience. I loved culinary school. I definitely wouldn't do it any other way. That said, we have to start this conversation with one about cost. So Natural Gourmet Institute, now Natural Gourmet Center, costs anywhere from $30,000 to $35,000 depending on which program you choose. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. That is a lot of money. That's a huge commitment. And I will say, I want to be fully transparent with you. The best gift my parents have ever given me is that I graduated from all of my higher education, so including my undergrad at Vanderbilt and culinary school, with no debt. They helped me with the cost of school. Some of my classmates I know took out loans to go to culinary school, and I will say that it is such a personal choice about whether or not that's right for you. For me, I don't think that I would have gone into debt to go to culinary school. It's definitely possible to work through culinary school for some programs. A lot of schools offer part-time programs. I went part-time and I was working part-time during that time as a personal chef already. It's definitely feasible for some programs to work your way through it and I guess pay your way through it that way. This does also roll right into another question that I got, whether or not I think I would be able to do the work that I'm doing without culinary school. And the short answer is absolutely. Yes, I would be able to do it. Like I just said, pretty much immediately after I started culinary school, I started working cooking in other people's homes. I've been talking so long, my tea is going cold. A lot of my friends and colleagues who work as personal chefs or have worked as personal chefs did not go to culinary school. They're fully self-taught. There are so many other ways to learn. You can go intern at a restaurant like I did, but you can do that on your own. Offering to work for free is like ethically dubious on the part of the restaurant that will hire you to do that, but the restaurant industry is an ethically dubious one, and so yes, you definitely can go work for free, or you can also go get hired at a restaurant. The best thing you can do in terms of like learning to cook very quickly and efficiently is working in a restaurant. The time that I spent in my culinary externship for like 3 months, I learned so much during that time. I could do a whole separate video on that alone, but I obviously didn't end up working full-time in restaurants because the restaurant life, that stress, is just not for me. That said, it's a really good way to learn. You can also go on YouTube and spend a lot of time watching tutorials. You can cook. The way that I started learning is just perusing other people's recipes, cooking through them, making mistakes in my own kitchen. There are just so many ways to learn, and culinary school doesn't have to be one of them. That is how a lot of my friends and colleagues who are personal chefs, or even people who work in restaurants that I know, started out, is just not at culinary school. I'm not sure about percentage-wise, but I would say it's not the norm to have gone in this industry. So let's close things out. Should you go to culinary school? I obviously can't answer that for you. Like I already said, there are so many ways to learn to cook that don't involve culinary school. That said, I will say for myself, my experience was so positive. So if you, like me, are a classroom learner and you are comfortable with the time and monetary investment, then all I can say are great positive things about my personal experience with culinary school. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for coming along. Until next Thursday, have a lovely, well-fed week ahead.